Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. My name is Peter Dakin. I'm MC for today. Welcome to everyone here and also online. And great to see you, Ian, here today and not online down the peninsula. We've been seeing you in recent times. Welcome along with Margaret. We would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and also pay our respects to elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to all Indigenous Australians present today. Thanks today will be given by Philip Cornish, followed by the Loyal Toast presented by President Chris. Please ensure your glass is charged. Thanks, Philip. I'll go and charge my glass.
Right. It's always good to be prepared. Last week, my wife and I spent an hour and a half on the balcony of our beachside accommodation, watching a pod of 4 whales playing with repeated breaches and tail slamming. It caused me to reflect on decisions made decades ago. I was born at a time when Australia was still hunting whales, not running an industry around whale watching. In the 1980s, the government sought to challenge whale hunting by other nations, not without controversy. We had ceased whaling by then. It was being done for its own sake, the saving of the whales, but I don't believe anyone dreamed of a whale watching sector worth billions. We won't know the results of many decisions made today till decades later, but I do know that some decisions that Rotary made some time ago, like the unfinished End Polio campaign, will have generations of people benefiting that we do not even know yet. I'd like to think that we might make some wise decisions now, albeit the world at the moment doesn't look like a lot of wise decisions are being made, that will pay dividends into the future. And of course, for good food, for your fellowship, we can all be grateful.
Thank you, Philip. I should say whale numbers are up to record levels, so it's looking good. Rotarian and guests, a toast to Australia and Rotary International. Australia and Rotary International. Thank you. Please be seated. We will be breaking for lunch and we'll reconvene at around 1:10 p.m. For those online, please join us through the offer for Zoom breakout rooms, which will open shortly. Thank you. Thank you all. Good afternoon once again. Members, visitors and guests, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to our 17th meeting of this Rotary year and our 5008th club meeting in our 103rd year. It's wonderful to see you here today, including those attending online. Today we welcome Ben Northey, Principal Conductor in Residence of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra and Chief Conductor, Christchurch Symphony Orchestra, speaking on a conductor's perspective, and is accompanied by MSO Director Dylan Stewart. Ben will be more fully introduced shortly by our Chair of the Day, past President Adrian Nelson. In the meantime, would you please join me in acknowledging and making them both welcome. Thank you. Also here today as our guests, we have Ian and Margaret Ross. Welcome. Ian celebrates a measly 50 years of membership. No, it's wonderful 50 years this week, and we will be acknowledging his service shortly. In the meantime, please make them both welcome. Thank you. We have a list of visiting Rotarians, visitors and guests of members. I'll read them out and invite those to stand, and at the end of the announcement then we'll all welcome you. So, guests of Rotarians, Douglas Hayward, guest of Robert Fisher. Irina Mares, guest of Ramona Martinovic. Kathy Rogers, guest of Peter Rogers. Marian Shaw, guest of John Shaw. Now, international visiting Rotarians, we have Debjani Ghosh from the Rotary Calcutta Club, India, and her guest Debasmita Bose. We also have visiting Australian Rotarians, David Fernie from Pakenham, David, and Millie Swan from Central Melbourne. I welcome you all. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to ask John Pebbody, Club Representative Ryman, to come to the podium to remind us of Ryman, and he has a call to action. John.
Thank you very much, President Chris, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I just want to remind you, I want to firstly thank Sue and the newsletter for putting the Ryman newsletter in our newsletter so we can see what's happening at Ryman. But I've now joined the committee as the representative of this club as well, so once a month attend the committee meetings. And there's a lot happening at Ryman, but we every time we step forward, we have more need that we create from our fellow Rotarians. So I'm just going to acquaint you with some of that need. First of all, we are opening on Saturdays now, but it's really the idea of opening from 10 till 1 on Saturdays is to give an opportunity for those Rotarians who are working through the week and just can't get there our normal opening days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's the day when we predominantly have the truck going out and coming back, bringing goods for Ryman. So it's our collection day. And then we're particularly looking for younger, strong members who can help us to bring the furniture and so on into the warehouse and then put it into position. So we have a driver, which is great, but we urgently need some fit people who are able to assist as jockeys. Now, a jockey is not one that rides the horse at the Cox Plate, but the person that helps to lift the furniture onto the truck. The truck has a lift and all that sort of thing, but we're keen to get some involvement there. We are really running low on some very important items as well. We walked in one Thursday when I work on Thursday there, and there were no fridge freezers there at all. And that's pretty well on everyone's list that they want a fridge freezer and washing machines. Now with fridges, we emphasise nothing under over 15 years, please, because the old ones have the old gas, which is a no-no. So we're looking for fridge freezers, washing machines, bedside tables just go like no one's business. They come in and they're almost out before we've even got them into place. And then smaller lounge suites. We get offered a lot of large lounge suites, but lounge suites are not very good for the people we're serving because they're normally going into very small apartments and the like. So two-seaters and smaller kitchen tables are the sorts of things we're looking for. And certainly if you know someone who's about to move and they're downsizing and so on, and they're going to have their furniture, don't put it out on the nature strip. Give us a ring, we can come and collect it and put it into the warehouse, and then we give to people who are needy. And some of the people come in are incredibly in need. They're people doing it tough, and it's an absolute joy. Last week, Vanessa has been helping me. She's my assistant when we host people. We had a young lady and she walked around. At the end, she gave Vanessa a hug, and she said, "This is better than anything that's ever happened in business, that I've never been given a hug after just helping somebody for an hour just to select a bit of furniture." So it's a great cause. We do thank everyone who's already been involved. And again, hopefully the club can go back one day and have another meeting there, because we also want the clubs to come and visit and feel part of this, because this is actually part of what we do. Melbourne is one of the clubs that's a member of Ryman. So that's it. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, John. And yes, we will be arranging a visit there early in the new year. On Tuesday, appropriately coinciding with the World End Polio Day, Club stalwart Ian Ross celebrated 50 years of membership of Rotary Melbourne, an incredible commitment to Rotary and our club. Dr. Ian Ross was inducted in October 1973 with a classification medicine, obstetrics and gynecology. In the past, Ian has been named a Paul Harris Fellow by the club for his extensive application and efforts for the community. Ian, along with his wife Margaret, daughter of Sir John Reid and also a Paul Harris Fellow, have been active in all aspects of the club: service, volunteering, fellowship and philanthropy. But Ian still runs the photography team and manages the Mornington Peninsula Fellowship Group. Ian, as expressed in the past by our appreciative past presidents, We recognise and thank you for your service to Rotary and our club, and want you to know your efforts have improved the lives of many and have added to the complex tapestry of our club. With 50 years of service above self for this club, Rotary in Australia, internationally, and for the vulnerable of our community, I have the greatest pleasure in declaring you an honorary member of this club. Thank you. I have asked Ian to come to the podium to speak of his 50-year Rotary journey and address the club.
Well, this is 4 minutes of 50 years crammed into it. I have to put my glasses on now. Now, the 50 years in Rotary, everyone was different, thanks to the diversity of the 50 presidents who showed differences in leadership, knowledge and skills. Changing roles and fellowship with members maintained my interest and enjoyment. My first knowledge of Rotary came from Jock Reed when I was courting Margaret. The second was when Jock took Margaret and me to visit Angus Mitchell in his apartment in the Windsor Hotel in 1956. The next was from Liz Goodell, who was president in 74, 75. I was his subtenant in consulting rooms at 14 Parliament Place. Rotary was a frequent topic of conversation over lunch. I was nominated by him and inducted by Frank Newman, who later became district governor in 74, 75. He was the last district governor from our club until Amanda went last year. My time in Rotary has seen a remarkable generic change. This has been clearly recorded by Owen Parnaby in his history of the club, so I don't need to go it all over, you just need to read about it from Owen. But one thing I will mention firstly is the mode of entry into membership of the club. It was vastly different now than in 1973. Membership then depended on classification. The classifications were based on major professions and industries with subgroups, 1 member per classification. The admission procedure took time and there were occasional disquiet by the sponsors. Over the years, there have been many changes which most of you have experienced. Next, there was changes in venue and format have altered our meetings. Fines, the song, prayer have ceased. A major change happened when admission of women members occurred in 89-90, and 4 of them have become presidents of our club. Now, there are many highlights. I think when I first joined, I was asked to speak at a Rotary Club meeting, and I was asked to give a talk on contraception, which is a bit daunting. Student exchange in the late 70s was most enjoyable, and really it was a great amount of fellowship with a number of the younger members who had age-compatible children. So the Pacific Regional Conference in 81 was an amazing event, as was the World Conference in Melbourne in 93. I've been, I think, at least 10 on-to-conference tours since 2002, and I think these are one of the most fellowship-worthy experiences that you can have. Golf with club members and in competition with the Victorian Golfing Fellowship and Rotary for the Rotary Club of Melbourne Cup and the Mitchell Sutherland Cup, and also having my name inscribed on the Rotary Club of Melbourne Cup. Now, I don't know where these cups are. I don't know whether they're still in the office. We'll have to ask Joe. They haven't been played for years. And lastly, the photo group. We've had I appreciate all the help we had from a few of the members in recording the events of the club. The best fellowship has always been group meetings. I was allotted to the Q group on joining, and after 1 year, as was the practice, I was made group captain. It was a bit daunting considering that group had quite a few high-profile Rotarians as members. I've also joined the Peninsula group in 2002. This was wondrously captained by Barry Rawlings. The group, with partners, met in members' homes for a barbecue lunch about 8 times a year, and the group still remains a premier group. Well, what would I like to see happen in the future? I think more fellowship, increased attendance at lunch meetings, greater participation in group activities, and revival of the Golfing Cups competition. When I first joined, there was a bit of a worry of getting the 60% attendance, but I was told by a number of people that you had to get your priorities right. Family first, work second, and Rotary third. And that's how it has been in our family. And I thank Margaret, who's really helped me with all those 3 aspects in my life. I'd also like to thank Joe, who's been a great help in recent years. Thank you, Joe. And also thank you to you all for your fellowship. It's been a most wonderful 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just, everyone, I'd like to present Ian with a few items. Firstly, the honorary member pin. Secondly, a fairly rare pair of socks, the RSM 50 Club. There you are. And lastly, the citation of Ian as an honorary member. Ian, thank you. Can we? Great. And Peter will present some flowers to Margaret. Ian, do you want a hand? Would you like a hand to present? Do you want me to hold that? Well, aren't we lucky you're inside as opposed to what's going on outside? So again, congratulations to Ian and Margaret. Moving on to notices, Paul Harris Breakfast, the annual Paul Harris Breakfast, which is held in November each year during Rotary Foundation Month. This year will feature Peter Hitchner, OAM. So if you've missed the news tonight, you can catch up. He's certainly been part of Melbourne for a long time. Organisers, Rotary Club Central Melbourne, invite you to attend. The event is on Tuesday, the 21st of November, 7:15 for 7:30 to 9 a.m. It'll be held at the Savoy Hotel. Tickets are available through Humanitix, and if you are planning attending, please make sure to be seated with the other Rotary Melbourne members. Second announcement in relation to the Around the Bay silent auction. The Around the Bay team advises members that we are entering the last leg of the Ride for Disadvantaged Kids with our annual silent auction. We are still looking for further auction items from members to add to the opportunities to obtain prizes, from bottles of wine, vintage wine, outdoor wear, vouchers, to paid entry to the next big bike events of the Peaks Challenge. Anything you could offer will enhance the opportunity for bargain and maybe Christmas presents. This will be explained further in an email to us all and in the bulletin in the forthcoming days. Evening meeting. There's a fascinating evening meeting forthcoming on the 15th of November. In line with our interests to delve into environment and sustainability issues, we have an electric vehicle Mythbusters session. So think of Top Gear, think of Jeffrey Robertson, and think of electric vehicles. The flyers are on your tables for a very special evening event. It'll be held at the Porsche showroom Brighton, and I'm sure there might be some salespeople there. But if you're smart, you might be able to get a free ride in one of the cars. A guest panel from Visi, Energy Australia and Team Global Express, all leaders in their space. In fact, the Team Global Express director looks after EV trucks that they use, and it'll explore all the facts around electric vehicles. Any of your tough questions about how long your car will last if it's an electric vehicle, or should you buy one versus what you've got now, this is the group to ask. Bookings via Humanitix, and there'll be links in our bulletin as well. And now to the business of the day. Recently, our Arts Committee visited Umarella, a war requiem for peace. We thought members would like to hear about the connection of this event with today's guest speaker. Would David Cram, Chair of our Arts Committee, come to the podium to report on the recent club visit to Umarella, ahead of past President Adrian Nelson's introduction to our guest speaker. David, over to you.
Thanks. President Chris, Rotarians and guests, I'll be very, very brief because you won't hear more of Ben than of me. Yes, this was the second of two visits organised by the Arts Committee. As you remember, beloved Tony Koski started it as a fellowship group, and thank you for saying there should be more visits and fellowship. We had 17 turn up to the evening meeting of the NGV, and we had a group of 10, including wives and partners for the Umarella. I think the Arts Committee, we need to sit down and publicise our events better. We're planning for next year. So Umarella, I was lucky enough to conduct the first version, which was a chamber version, the Port Fairy Festival a few years ago. And I was delighted that Deborah Cheetham, you know, because Deborah Cheetham Fryer, as she is now, she's a regular visitor and a great friend of Rotary Melbourne. She composed it, then she reorchestrated it for the very big orchestra, and we were there the other day. I've seen it twice. The first time was performed by the MSO, and then the other day. Ben, you're doing a great job, and the choir and everything was magnificent, the soloists. And it also proves that music has a very important thing to say about our society and about the relationship between the First Nations of Australia and post-colonial society. So let's get more people along to our Arts Committee events, the architectural walks, the concert, the theatre, and the gallery visits and the literature. Thank you, Arts Committee members, for coming. Thank you, Chris, for this opportunity. All the very best.
Well, thank you, David. Now, Rotary Melbourne has an historic connection with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. And it began in 1921 when the orchestra's founder, Alberto Zellman, spoke here at our club. And he spoke and he sung and he played his violin at a club meeting back in 1921 in our club's very first year. Now, Alberto's successor as conductor, Fritz Hart, joined our club in 1927. Now, Fritz trained at London's Royal College of Music with Gustav Holst and Vaughan Williams. He moved to Australia as musical director of J.C. Williamson. He then worked closely with Dame Nellie Melba. In 1927 was appointed conductor of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. In October 1929, he conducted the orchestra's first free outdoor performance. And they continue to this day, over 90 years later, as the Sydney Myer Free Concerts. And of course, our Rotary Club, through our Arts Committee, continues to attend these each year. Over the past 12 months, the chair of our Arts Committee, Maestro David Cram, and I have been working in conjunction with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra to revive this historic relationship so that our iconic organisations can once again work together to help the community. Many thanks to Dylan Stewart, the Director of Marketing and Sales, who's joined us today, to Sophie Galaes, the orchestra's first female Managing Director, and also the Chief Conductor, Jaime Martin, all of whom have played a part in our new relationship. But most of all, today, we welcome Ben Northey, who's the Principal Conductor in Residence of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, and also the Artistic Director of the Hush Foundation. He'll be presenting to us on leadership, a conductor's perspective. Most recently, at the end of August, I was privileged to see Ben conduct the orchestra in a concert with jazz icon Wynton Marsalis. It was an incredible performance, one that brought together Ben's breadth of experience from the Sibelius Academy in Finland to New Zealand's Christchurch Symphony Orchestra, where he's also the chief conductor. He's conducted the London Philharmonic Orchestra, the Tokyo Philharmonic, the National Symphony Orchestra of Columbia, Opera Australia, and more. Please put your hands together and welcome Ben Northey.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Adrian. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for inviting me. It was also great to hear John talking about Ryman. My mother is downsizing at the moment, and I think you might have just hit the jackpot, John. It's a downsize of biblical proportions, I'm telling you, and I'll be in touch. I am proud to be an Australian musician. You know, I believe Australia is such a deeply musical nation. It's one of our great superpowers. Our musicians are globally recognised as highly talented and superbly trained. Music in Australia is a connected ecosystem, from early childhood music education right through the school music system, the youth music organisations, community music groups, tertiary institutions, our elite training institutions like the National Academy of Music, freelance performers, professional presenting companies, up to our flagship arts organisations like the MSO. As we know, and it's wonderful to have heard David talk about music's power beyond itself, and also to have Doug here. It's not often you get to speak to two conductors in the audience as a conductor. Music has the capacity to be a transformative medium. It has incredible value, which can't be underestimated. It's always a battle to keep our musical achievements and unique musical culture here in Australia recognised, supported and celebrated, but it's a battle worth fighting. As the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously said, "Life without music would be a mistake." I love that quote. It's very true. And I see that the motto of Rotary is to create hope in the world. And I also see that as an important role of music and arts organisations more broadly. I'd like to just talk a little bit about music itself, which is an abstract art form. Sound waves of various shapes and sizes produced by instruments or voices are interpreted by our brains through our ears. It seems to be an innate human understanding that is universal, and the fact that it's become such a social activity and a shared activity, and perhaps it always has been, it's the most empowering aspect of music, that bringing together of people. We share the making of music as performers and creators. We also share the experience of music as members of an audience, as listeners. And it's this non-verbal communication that is the most fascinating thing about music. How is it that these sound waves can make us feel certain things, make us experience deep and profound emotion, to inspire us to great thoughts and deeds, and perhaps most importantly, to unite us through a powerful shared experience in humanity? So I've been making music as long as I can remember, and we've all been making or listening to music our whole lives. It's a central and defining human experience. It serves various important functions, from marking special occasions or religious ceremonies as therapy, as relaxation, as motivation, entertainment, propaganda, to tell stories and to create worlds of imagination within us. While we're on the topic of Indigenous Australians and hearing the reflections on Eumerella that David gave, it made me think about the use of music in ancient cultures, and the fact that Indigenous Australians use music to map the land, often for thousands of kilometres through their traditional songlines. And I'm fascinated by this. By singing the songs in the appropriate sequence, our first Australians can navigate vast distances, often travelling through the deserts of Australia's interior. The continent contains an extensive system of songlines, some of which are only a few kilometres, whilst others traverse hundreds of kilometres through lands of many different Indigenous peoples, and peoples who may speak markedly different languages and have different cultural traditions. One songline I discovered marks a 3,500 kilometre route connecting the central desert region of Australia with the east coast to the place we now call Byron Bay. Desert peoples travelled to the ocean to observe fishing practices, and coastal people travelled inland to sacred sites such as Uluru, using these songlines to guide their path. And so even in ancient nations of Indigenous Australia, music was playing a powerful uniting role. In the modern world, As an example of human creativity and imagination, music is really unmatched. The creation and performance of music is an example, I think, and I'm biased obviously, of human beings at our absolute best. The language of music may differ from place to place on our planet or from culture to culture. However, it is a universal experience we can all understand and share. And I often talk about the orchestra as a metaphor for what we can achieve when we listen to each other and work together. And I've learned a lot about listening through my work as a musician. Collaboration and understanding begins with listening. And I've also learned a great deal about leadership in my role as a conductor, and not just musical leadership, but the leadership of people. And a conductor is only as good as the performance that we can extract from the players. So I'll talk a bit about leadership, but first I'll just give you a very quick conducting lesson, because I often think people look at conductors and think, what the hell's going on up there? I have no idea. That person's just waving their arms aimlessly around. Part of it is that, but there's method to our madness. Probably the biggest responsibility of a conductor is the speed of the music, the tempo of the music. And our movements are interpreted by the musicians, and they follow the beat that we are giving them. This is a very elementary conducting lesson, but a beat is literally, if you put your right hand up in the air, and you're free to do this without injuring anyone around you, lowering your right hand or your dominant hand, and then just bouncing it off an imaginary surface, like a little drum. And that is the beat. There's a little click at the bottom of the beat. And so the orchestra can actually see when to make the sound. Bom, bom, bom. Now that's a pattern of 1 in a bar. That's called a downbeat, right? It just drops down. If the music was in 2, that pattern would be different. It's probably easier if I go like this. That would be like this, out this side, like a backwards J. So it's down, up, 1, 2. So that's a march. A waltz is in 3. 1, 2, 3. Down, right, up, down, right, up. And if you want the music to be faster, you beat faster. 4 is down, left, right, up, down, left, right, up. And then there's 5s and there's 6s and 7s and all kinds of different patterns. So now I think you're all capable of leading an orchestra, at least initially. There's more to it than that. But why do we need a conductor in the orchestra? I think it's mainly to stop the musicians killing each other and disagreeing about almost everything. But what is the role? And it is a unifying presence. It's an artistic leader, an energy giver, a negotiator, a leader and a collaborator. You're part of the team, you're performing with the musicians, but you're making no sound in the performance. And conductors are only as good as their vision and communication and the performance of the musicians. So it's ultimately about empowering people, I think. Conductors are usually musicians with extensive instrumental experience. Sometimes they can be players that don't play an orchestral instrument, but play the piano very well. They can be gifted in their ideas, though, and their imagination, the way they're able to communicate their ideas and to get an orchestra to play for them. It's not about power. And this is, I hear people talk about conducting as an expression of power, that you're standing up there dictating to everybody what they must do. Power comes with the role, but it's not about power. It's not even about control, although that is one aspect of the role as well. Sometimes people on the podium at the front of the orchestra feel great power and control, and sometimes that might be the motivation for people seeking the job. That usually ends very badly. And it's really about responsibility to unlock the music that you are performing, to bring the music to life, to animate the music by unlocking the expressive potential of the human beings behind the instruments. On behalf of the composer, you're a representative of the composer if the composer's not there. On behalf of the audience, there's a lot to conducting. It's a vast suite of skills and it's hugely challenging. And this is the greatest thing about it and why it's the best job in the world. The word maestro is the Italian word for teacher. My job, as I said, is to unlock potential in both music and people. And to do that, I have to be able to see what that potential is, to have a vision of what might be possible. And to have a destination as a leader is crucial. Bringing people to a vision, empowering people to contribute, unlocking that creativity and freedom of expression of your team or those around you. That's the role of the great leader. And so even though individuals in the orchestra have important roles to play, nobody is just a role player. Everyone, I think, is an artist, and they need to be encouraged to be an artist as well. And by that I mean they should be constantly using their own unique creative intelligence. They're not just blending in with the crowd. So creative intelligence, we all have that as humans. We're born as creative beings. In the orchestra and in music, it's not enough to know things, to know what to do when. We need the musicians to make beautiful, natural, responsive decisions in a moment, in the right moment. We need that process to be intuitive, to be unnoticeable to the observer, and in many ways unnoticeable even to the player, something you don't think about. Those decisions are always informed by trust and knowledge of each other in the orchestra, by understanding. It's the preparation of your own part, but the understanding of everybody else's part, to the point where you can almost predict what those around you are going to do. And that's the thing about orchestras. Often the players have been playing together for decades, and they know each other so well, and they're able to build this awareness and this alignment. And it's what makes the orchestra such a great example of a team. It's easy to get lost in the sheer scale of an orchestra, but a cog in the wheel approach is ultimately counterproductive, as it disempowers the innate creativity of the individual. And the actions of one can be the most impactful, whether it be setting an example of behaviour, of culture, of sticking out, of the texture if you're not listening and balancing properly. Sometimes the person with seemingly the least responsibility can have the biggest impact on the outcome, as I discovered in one of my first ever conducting jobs, conducting a youth orchestra with a young cymbal player who must have been about 12 years old. And we were playing Wagner's Elsa's Procession to the Cathedral, which starts very softly and builds over some period of minutes to an enormous climax, which is accompanied by a very loud cymbal crash, the only cymbal crash that occurs in the piece. And that was the job of this young kid who was 12 years old. And in the rehearsals, we'd be conducting along, and I'd sort of be about halfway through the build-up, and all of a sudden I'd hear this cymbal crash out of nowhere, look up, and I said, "What? That's way too early." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I miscounted." And then other times I'd give the moment of this big climactic, moment in the music, no cymbal. And then a couple of bars later, the cymbal had crashed. And he'd never got it right in any of the rehearsals. And we were at the concert day, and I said, "You're just going to have to count." I think it was 72 bars he had to count. So forever. I said, "Just count, just count." I said, "You know how to count. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, because every bar is 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, and just count your way up." I didn't think he would count out loud, but we started the piece and I realised the audience weren't interested in anything I was doing. They were watching this kid who had both of the cymbals. This is minutes out from his note. Both of the cymbals ready to play, and he was just looking at me going, 1, 2, 3. And, 35, 47, and I could feel that the music was the least important thing. And when we got to the moment, I could see he'd counted it perfectly. And he swung the cymbals together at bar 72, and I thought, "You beauty, he's finally going to get this in the right place." And they didn't touch each other, the cymbals. The poor kid. He recovered from that, and the next time I saw him, he was playing in the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, so he bounced back strong. There's a great quote from the German composer and pedagogue Karl Orff, who said, "I believe that every human being has an artist inside them. This possibility can either be encouraged or destroyed. My guiding principle has always been to encourage." And it's that creative freedom and recognition of individuality which is the essence of transforming a performance of music from the ordinary to the extraordinary. The difference between a boring performance and a potentially life-changing experience for performers and listeners. So I'm only as good as the vision I have and the performance of that vision that the players choose to give me. I'll reflect briefly on the work with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. So this year I'm celebrating 20 years with the MSO. Thank you, Dylan. I don't know how that's quite possible. It's slightly disturbing that that's happened, but anyway, here we are. You know, I was unlocked by a teacher, John Hopkins, who unlocked my potential and led me to this destination of a career in conducting. I didn't think it was possible, so he sort of taught me a lesson in possibility about encouraging me to pursue conducting. But I was thinking about the 20 years with the MSO and some of the highlights, the great music, but a lot of it's the social impact projects, the using music as the medium for social change, the cultural collaborations, the sharing the orchestra, obviously working with the musicians and the people in the organisation, the amazing guest artists. But the other thing is the platforming of emerging talent, you know, premiering new works by composers, the education projects. You know, we've toured internationally, but just being able to be a part of the discussion about what a modern symphony orchestra is, what is our role in the city and our community, how can we enrich the lives of people, how can we remain relevant and vital, and how do we reach out to people to invite them to experience the orchestra, what's our purpose and our potential in the 21st century. All of these are very big questions. You know, when I look back at this year, at the end of each year I review, I look back and I go, what were the value things I did? What were the things that made the biggest impact on others, which is how I measure what I'm doing. And I think about the Maya Bowl series that you mentioned, Adrian. We performed Carmina Burana there at the beginning of this year. Fantastic choral work, big, large scale thing, 10,000 people listening. The Maya Bowl series is all about connection with community, free concerts, people being able to hear the orchestra, all kinds of things. I look back on the MSO played the ABC Classic 100 Instruments concert this year, which was televised on ABC TV. 1 million people have seen that classical music special, the most watched classical music special in the history of Australian music. That's about advocacy. We used young emerging Australian artists. We're celebrating Australian talent. We're putting a spotlight on Australia's connection and relationship with music, which we don't always talk about. And hopefully politicians will listen and realise that the breadth of our and depth of our musical experience and appreciation. And like I said, having the chance to talk about Australia as a musical superpower, which I think it is, building awareness of that. You know, working with youth orchestras, I find that to be tremendously rewarding, developing the creativity of our young people. We do that with conductors as well. Adrian, you mentioned the Jazz at Lincoln Centre, Wynton Marsalis. You know, that's an international collaboration where Wynton's using music to tell the story of American music, you know, an American aspiration. That was Hugh Morella, David mentioned this, you know, on the night of the referendum, which was just a coincidence to be telling this First Nations story on the night of the referendum. It was deeply emotional. But those kinds of projects, they generate discussion, they generate understanding, and they're an example of cultural leadership. There's so many other things I could mention. Time's going to get away from me, and I want to have some questions. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the energy of leaders, or particularly of conductors. And there's a German word, there's always an untranslatable German word, and mine is Ausstrahlung, which, David, how would you translate Ausstrahlung? Outradiating, exactly. Radiant energy, outward radiation, outward shine. What is the impact your presence is having on those around you? And I think that's at the core of leadership, but also of humanity. How are we impacting others through our presence? And is this a quality that can be nurtured or developed? And that radiance is absolutely crucial for conductors, as we primarily use non-verbal communication. And I've come to think of energy as a tangible force. The players in the orchestra bring their own energy. The conductor has a unique capacity to determine the focus of that collective energy of the group. And it's not just charisma, it's the entire suite of leadership qualities. And it also struck me that Ausstrahlung is something which can change. And I've become convinced that you can invest in it, you can nurture it and look after it. I think it wasn't really something that I consider to be about particular skills or talents, but it's more a concept around well-being and a sense of self-balance. So, you know, in my case, I guess it's the work, family, friends balance that we heard. It was Ian, I think, talking about as well. That feeds my sense of well-being and enables me to offer more to those in my work life. It puts the focus on my interactions with others. So our success, I think, as people, leaders or not, is the sum of the impact of our interactions with others. So like the players in an orchestra, we all have the capacity to make a positive impact on those around us. Like an orchestra, we can listen better to each other and respond sensitively to each other with empathy. And like an orchestra, we can realise that when we really listen to each other, work together in harmony, understanding is built and we can do great things. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you today. Thank you for your support of the MSO and all of the work you do as a society to help create hope in the world. That work, as we know, is never finished. We all need to play our part in this big global orchestra we are in. I'll hope to see you at a concert soon. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ben. He's most graciously agreed to take questions for a few minutes. So
Yeah, and there's
Peter
just
has
one
some-
comment online, chat box from Christina Boys. Ben is such an excellent speaker. I've really enjoyed the presentation. Love the MSO. So there's
Thank
a
you
nice
very
comment.
much.
Far
Appreciate
away.
that.
Robert.
Thanks very much for your talk, Ben. Robert Fisher. You've conducted many different composers over the years. Do you have a favorite and why?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer. I gravitate to the music of the 20th century because I'm a product of the 20th century myself. I love the early 20th century modernists. You know, it's not always the most popular music, but, you know, Bartok, Stravinsky, Sibelius, because I studied in Finland. I love that music. But usually the music I'm conducting at the time, I fall in love with, and that's my job. There's very little music that I don't find something to really connect with. So, but yeah, Stravinsky or Beethoven, those two are pretty high on my list, I'd say.
Quite a cultural,
I might ask a
quite
question.
a cultural group, you can
Whilst you
see.
get towards Kathy, Peter, I might ask a question. You've obviously had a lot of international experience from Colombia to Japan, Finland. How do you manage an orchestra in different languages?
Yeah, that's a good question. And even in Finland, although they all speak such good English, it's amazing how much you can communicate without words, you know, and that's the role of the conductor. My old teacher in Finland said, when you start talking, they stop listening. It's not entirely true, but it's nearly true. And so I try and keep my chat very short. And honestly, the body language and the musical will that comes through your gestures, that's the communication. So I can conduct with an orchestra that I don't speak their language at all. We can still make music and communicate.
One reads that you studied classical saxophone,
I
Ben.
did.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious to understand what place these days the saxophone plays in your life.
Well, I used to have 3 saxophones and I was a professional musician for 10 years. I've got 1 left and it's safely holstered in its case in my wardrobe. When I started conducting, John Hopkins said, you have to be 150% into this, which means I had to stop playing and just study conducting. I had so much catching up to do, I started late. And if you don't play your instrument every day, and then you go back to it after some years, believe me, it's not a satisfying experience, especially when as a living you work with the best musicians in the world and you hear them play all the time. Nobody needs to hear me play the saxophone anymore. I was very good in my day and now I leave it entirely to the professionals. So what I would say is it's a wonderful instrument, the classical saxophone. It's a shame it's not used in the orchestra much. However, there are pieces that use the saxophone to great effect. So, yes, but leave it to the professionals.
Ben, I've been listening to Melbourne Symphony Orchestra for many years and really loved the series, the pop series of that's not now there, but that when my children were growing up, it was a great experience to be able to take them to hear the symphony orchestra, and they've all benefited and had a broader love of music, I think, because of those experiences. Digitisation seems to have been very interesting, and I'm quite fascinated when I come to hear the orchestra playing the score for a film, for example. And my first date with my now wife was to hear Toy Story with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. How hard is that to actually play a score for a movie?
It depends on the film, but I've done a lot of those projects and I love them. The synchronization can be diabolically difficult. The hardest concert I think I ever conducted was Leonard Bernstein's West Side Story, the movie, which the music is terrible in the film because the singers couldn't sing, and you have to follow them around, you know, with the synchronization of the click track. So it depends. The other films like Star Wars and these big movies, the John Williams scores, they're a bit more organic. You know, you're not locked in. You can be a bit more flexible as long as you hit the right moments at the right time. Yes, but that's the biggest challenge, I think, is just the synchronization of those things. And the orchestra, you haven't got the normal flexibility that you have in a normal performance. So it's a different kind of skill, but most people are hearing their orchestra for the first time through a television, through a cinema speaker, through an iPhone or their iPad. Then they're hearing it in a movie or a computer game. That's how most kids are hearing their orchestra for the first time. So, you know, that's our opportunity to connect with them.
Well, that's enough questions, I'm afraid, Ben. Time's got the better of us. But I must say that sort of we as a Rotary Club, I think there are a lot of synergies with an orchestra. I think some of our members often they go by the beat of their own drum. And sometimes we may blow a lot of wind as well. But at the end of the day, when, as you said, when there's harmony, the things that we can achieve are remarkable. So on behalf of the Rotary Club of Melbourne, we have a small gift for you. We have a Rotary 100 coin, but also some special Rotary socks for you. Not the special members edition, the 50-year members editions are a very unique one. But thank you so much for your talk with us today. And I hope this is the start of renewing the historic partnership between the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra and Rotary Melbourne. So thank you very much. Once again, thank you to all of our visitors and guests for attending today, in particular to Ian and Margaret. Ian, congratulations on 50 years of membership. Just wow. Thank you also to our MC, past President Peter Dakin, and for his reflection, Philip Cornish. And as always, our lunch setup and reception teams for their efforts. If anyone can stay behind at the end to assist for a few minutes, it's always very much appreciated. A reminder, next week, we're back here at number 35 for our special Melbourne Cup Day lunch. Our guest speaker will be Bernard Saundry, who's the current CEO of RSN Racing and Sport, 927 AM, and a former CEO of Racing Victoria. And his topic will be the changing landscape of horse racing. So get all your horsing paraphernalia and gear and come along next Wednesday. It'll be a great day. And bring a friend too.